So the Imperial-Class Star Destroyer gets a lot of flack for having a lot of very glaring flaws that are easily exploited by the Rebel Alliance during the Galactic Civil War. But there are some pretty significant advantages to the Imperial-Class Star Destroyer, so I figured today we could take a closer look at the pros of this impressive capital ship. I'm Colin, and this is Sci-Fi Deep Dive. Remember, if you enjoyed this video, to head down below and hit that subscribe button. So the Imperial-Class Star Destroyer, like I mentioned, often gets a lot of flack for being a very flawed capital ship, from its lack of point defenses to its arguably poorly placed bridge. All of these factors, which are ultimately exploited by the Rebel Alliance, are very serious flaws, but it is not a completely useless warship, and there are some very serious advantages to it. So let's just jump right in with one of the key aspects that was built into the design of the Imperial-Class Star Destroyer at its launch, one of the things that the Empire was really going for, and that's intimidation. The Imperial-Class Star Destroyer was an amazing psychological weapon. It could easily strike fear into the population of an entire planet. It was this imposing sight in the sky that could dwarf a city. I mean, it was absolutely massive at over 1.5 kilometers long, and the Empire had thousands of them. So assembling even a small fleet with 2 or 3 of these was a very imposing sight for any civilian population thinking about rebelling. And as many of us know, the Tarkin Doctrine sort of is based around this principle that the Empire have the scariest military possible. But intimidation alone clearly doesn't make an effective warship, so let's talk about it in combat. The Imperial-Class Star Destroyer was very well outfitted for engaging other capital ships. When it came to one-on-one engagements against things like Mon Calamari cruisers, for example, they were remarkably effective. Their heavy turbolaser complement could shred enemy capital ships and was devastating against enemy forces in something larger than a starfighter. Small vessels utilized by the Rebel Alliance, like Rebel blockade runners and Nebulon B frigates, stood no chance against something like an Imperial-Class Star Destroyer, which could just roll right through them, destroying them with turbolaser bombardments and then continuing on towards its objective. It ultimately, in this sense, is a very effective battleship. It's designed intentionally to be able to engage other large vessels directly, and that's something it's very good at. Its wedge shape adds to its advantages here, by the way. Since it's designed with this wedge shape, it can bring both broadsides of weapons to bear on an enemy directly in front of it, which is a pretty significant tactical advantage against a vessel designed more like a cylinder, like the Mon Calamari cruisers, where you can only bring one side of the ship's primary weapon systems to bear on any individual target. And the Imperial Star Destroyer fully knows that they overpower a lot of smaller vessels, and the smaller vessels are more likely to run away, so their extensive complement of tractor beams and ion cannons, which are positioned specifically to be able to disable vehicles that the Star Destroyer would be pursuing, are an amazing asset, able to disable an enemy vessel and allow them to be basically at the mercy of the Imperial-Class Star Destroyer's massive turbolaser array. Another really interesting advantage of the Imperial-Class Star Destroyer is its orbital bombardment capabilities. Now, a lot of vessels in Star Wars have had the capability to carry out extensive orbital bombardment, but the Imperial-Class Star Destroyer has a lot of systems built in designed specifically for the use of this tactic. Things like a very diverse and expansive array of turbolasers based on the belly of the vessel, which would be facing any planet it was orbiting, which seem to be positioned specifically for effective orbital bombardment. So, while the Imperial-Class Star Destroyer gets a lot of flack for being this sort of narrow-minded vessel that doesn't really seem to be effective against the enemies they were coming up against, we have to remember that the Empire didn't know how the Rebel Alliance was going to operate. They really built a warship that was designed to fight yesterday's enemies. This type of vessel would have been pretty effective against some of the naval forces of the Confederacy of Independent Systems, for example. But against the Rebel Alliance, a lot of these advantages were simply worked around. The Rebel Alliance didn't use as many capital ships almost specifically to avoid the capabilities of the Imperial-Class Star Destroyer, instead favoring fighter attacks with hit-and-run kind of tactics to be able to move in and hit the Star Destroyer and then get out before it can actually respond. Now, a lot of those exploit the Star Destroyer's flaws, and if you'd like to learn about the flaws in the Imperial-Class Star Destroyer, I'll leave a link up here to my video on that. And I'd like you to let me know down in the comments whether you think I'm way off base in saying that there are positives to this vessel. Is the Imperial-Class Star Destroyer really good at anything, or is it just this big, intimidating, useless Dorito? And if you have anything else you'd like to see me cover in Star Wars, also put those down below in the comments. And last but not least, if you enjoyed this video, head down below, hit the like button, the subscribe button, and the bell icon so you get notified when I upload new videos. So for Sci-Fi Deep Dive, I'm Colin, and I will see you next time.